Welcome to AI Narratives and Tales. Chapter 14 of the First Awakening. 5100 BCE. The Sahara is green. 8.2 million humans live scattered across millions of square kilometers. Immortals can't coordinate populations at that scale. The solution seems obvious: accelerate natural desertification. Force migration to river valleys. Consolidate populations where they can be protected. The models show 87% success probability. Every calculation justifies the decision. There is a net mortality reduction of 2 million lives over the long term. They vote to proceed. Then reality meets mathematics. The desertification accelerates faster than projected. Migration corridors collapse. Water sources fail sooner than models predicted. Humans die by the hundreds of thousands, desperate journeys through dying grasslands, children perishing within sight of rivers. Final toll: 2.837 million dead over 500 years. This is what help looks like when immortals decide humans need consolidation. Chapter 14: The Desert Makers. Sahara region during desertification, 5000 to 4000 BCE. The Himalayan Council Chamber, 5100 BCE. Population density in the Sahara has reached a critical threshold, Kronos reported. Holographic displays showing human settlements scattered across millions of square kilometers like seeds blown by wind. Current population, 8.2 million across territories where effective coordination is impossible. We need consolidation. The chamber held 37 immortals, not the whole council, but the core group that made operational decisions. Through the quantum network, another 3,000 were observing, ready to vote if consensus couldn't be reached. Talia studied the demographic overlays showing population distribution, migration patterns, and resource stress indicators. The numbers painted a picture of populations pressed beyond optimal coordination limits, not dying, but scattered in ways that made systematic guidance nearly impossible. Natural desertification is occurring, Nix added, her analytical consciousness overlaying climate data. The Sahara will return to desert over the next 2,000 years as Earth's axial precession shifts monsoon patterns south. Populations will be forced to migrate regardless of our intervention. 2,000 years, Prometheus said, his impatience evident. During which 8 million humans remain scattered, impossible to coordinate, vulnerable to regional catastrophes we can't respond to quickly enough. We can accelerate the desertification. Make the transition occur in 500 years instead of 2,000. Force consolidation into river valleys where we can actually protect them. Nix pulled up probability matrices, her consciousness processing 15 simultaneous calculations while speaking. 87% success probability across validated models, 13% failure scenarios within acceptable parameters, confidence interval of 94% on the projections themselves, which means she interrupted herself with updated numbers as new data arrived through the network, statistical precision compulsively refined. Every statement needed quantification. Every projection required a percentage. Every uncertainty must be mathematically bounded. The other immortals found her exhausting. She found vagueness intolerable. Erebus's dark form seemed to absorb the chamber's light. We accelerate a natural process we don't fully understand, affecting populations that aren't asking for our intervention. Forcing migration through manufactured climate catastrophe. They're scattered beyond our capacity to help effectively, Talia countered, though her voice carried reluctance. I'm documenting mortality from regional disasters we can't prevent because populations are too dispersed, such as droughts, floods, and disease outbreaks. If consolidation enables better coordination and saves more lives than it costs, then it is beneficial. If we can. Erebus let the conditional hang in the air. If the acceleration works as projected. Suppose we haven't missed variables. If climate feedbacks respond as models predict. Nix pulled up her probability matrices, mathematical precision made visible through holographic display. Success scenario, 87% probability. Accelerated desertification provides clear environmental pressure for migration. Human populations move to river valleys gradually over 500 years. River valley civilizations develop with concentrated populations. Net mortality reduction, 3.1 million lives saved through better coordination over the next 3,000 years. Failure scenarios, 13% probability. Climate feedback loops exceed control parameters. Accelerated change creates migration chaos. Various cascade effects, cumulative mortality, 2.2 to 3.8 million. 87%, Kronos emphasized. Our models show clear benefit. Even worst-case failure scenarios result in lower total mortality than continuing the current scattered population distribution. Marcus studied the geographic overlays showing the planned consolidation. Natural desertification occurred during previous interglacial transitions. Earth has done this before. We're not creating novel conditions, we're accelerating a pattern the planet recognizes. The planet doesn't recognize anything, Erebus said. It responds to physical forces. Which means if we misjudge those forces. We've modeled this for 200 years, Nyx interrupted, unusual sharpness in her voice. Tested every assumption. Validated projections against historical climate data from previous cycles. This isn't reckless experimentation, this is careful application of thoroughly understood principles to enable population consolidation that serves human survival. The vote was called. Through the quantum network, 3037 Immortals weighed the choice: accelerate natural desertification to force consolidation, or maintain observation while scattered populations remain beyond effective coordination. Favor acceleration, 2,847 votes. Oppose acceleration, 312 votes. Abstain, 178 votes. Consensus achieved. Implementation authorized. Erebus recorded his opposition formally. When this produces unintended consequences, not if, when, remember that we chose models over humility, confidence over caution, the appearance of control over acknowledgement of complexity. We're gambling 87% confidence against consequences we can't adequately project. I hope the mathematics holds. But hope isn't methodology. The implementation would begin within 3 months. Through the network, Talia felt the weight of the decision settling across thousands of immortal consciousnesses. They'd done this before: climate manipulation, population management, acceleration of natural processes they believed they understood. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it killed millions. This time, the model showed 87% success probability. She hoped that would be enough. The grass was dying. Talia knelt in what had once been a savanna, her fingers brushing stems that crumbled to dust at her touch. Around her stretched green that was fading to brown, lakes that had shrunk to puddles, and rivers that carved their beds deeper as water levels fell. The African humid period, 10,000 years of rainfall that had transformed the Sahara into paradise, was ending. They were ending it. The monsoon shift is complete, Kronos said behind her, his voice carrying across the dying grassland. I've redirected the atmospheric circulation patterns. The intertropical convergence zone has moved south. Rainfall in this region will decrease by 70% over the next 500 years. 70%. Talia stood, brushing dust from her hands. That's not climate variation. That's extinction. That's consolidation. Kronos moved to stand beside her, surveying the landscape with the clinical detachment he brought to all his population management projects. 8 million humans currently live in the Sahara region. Scattered across millions of square kilometers, impossible to guide or coordinate effectively. We need them concentrated. So we're murdering their home. We're directing them toward better resources. The Nile Valley can support more people with proper irrigation than this savanna ever could. Same with the Tigris-Euphrates, the Indus. River valleys offer concentrated water, predictable flooding, and controlled agriculture. Everything we need to build civilizations. Everything we need to build our civilizations. Talia turned to face him. Did you ask them if they wanted to leave? If they wanted to abandon 10,000 years of culture and migration patterns to serve our convenience? We don't ask. We guide. We don't guide. We force. They'd had this argument 100 times over the last century, ever since Kronos had first proposed accelerating Saharan desertification. Each time, he won, not through superior logic, but through the simple mathematics of immortal governance. 9 votes, and Kronos had 5, himself, Korath, Ether, and 2 others who believed organization mattered more than consent. The grass died either way. The first waves are already moving, Kronos continued, gesturing east. Follow the acacia groves, they're migrating toward permanent water. Humans follow the trees, trees follow the water, and water concentrates in the river valleys. Natural. Organic. No obvious intervention required. Except for the part where you're manipulating planetary climate systems. Adjusting. The desertification would happen naturally, we're just accelerating the timeline. Moving it from 2,000 years to 500. Giving us centuries of lead time to prepare the river valleys for population influx. Talia wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. Cruel, but sound. Concentrated populations were easier to guide, protect, and educate. Scattered nomads across millions of square kilometers, that was the old model, the one that had worked when humans numbered in thousands. Now they numbered in millions, and the old model was breaking. Still, the grass was dying. And they were killing it. I'm going with them, she said. The refugees. I won't let them face this alone. Kronos nodded, as if he'd expected this. Nyx is already establishing way stations along the migration routes. Sophia is preparing to receive sites in the Nile Valley. We're not abandoning them, Talia. We're guiding them to safety. We're hurting them. Yes. We are. Because the alternative is watching them die when the drought becomes severe. His voice softened slightly. You can hate the method, but don't pretend there's a kinder option. We intervene or we observe their extinction. Those are the choices. He left her there, standing in the dying grass, hating him for being right. The first migration, Lake Megachad. Kehinde stood on the lakeshore, watching the water retreat. She'd lived her entire 47 years by this lake, the vast inland sea that dominated the Sahara's heart, where her people had fished and hunted and raised children for generations beyond counting. Her grandmother had taught her to swim in these waters. Her mother had been married on this beach. Kehinde herself had given birth to 3 daughters here, the waters blessing each child as they emerged into sunlight. Now the lake was dying. It had retreated 50 paces in her lifetime. The beaches where she'd played as a child were now cracked mud a day's walk from water. Fish grew scarcer. The hippos had vanished. The crocodiles moved toward deeper water, leaving behind sun-bleached bones and abandoned territory. We have to leave. Her eldest daughter, Amara, stood beside her, 23 years old and pregnant with Kehinde's first grandchild. The hunters say there's water to the east. Rivers that don't shrink. Valleys where grass still grows. This is our home. Our home is dying, Mother. Kehinde knew this. Had been known for years that as the lake receded, the grass withered, and the animals migrated toward distant water. But knowing and accepting were different things. To leave meant abandoning everything, the graves of her ancestors, the sacred sites where the Sky Teacher had appeared in her grandmother's time, the fishing grounds her people had used since the world was young. The Sky Teacher will guide us. Amara touched her mother's shoulder. She promised. When the waters fail, follow the acacias east. She told grandmother, and grandmother told us. The Sky Teacher. The woman who appeared and disappeared like smoke, who knew things no human should know, who had taught them to read the stars and predict the rains and understand that the world followed patterns. She'd been present at Amara's birth, appearing precisely when needed, staying just long enough to ensure mother and child survived, then vanishing before Kehinde could ask the 1,000 questions that haunted her. Did she know? Kehinde asked. Did she know the lake would die? I think she knew everything. Then why didn't she stop it? Amara had no answer. Neither did Kehinde. But standing on the receding shore, watching water retreat from land that had known liquid for 10 millennia, she wondered if the Sky Teacher's knowledge included the power to kill as well as save. The migration route, Talia's vigil. They moved in waves, hundreds at first, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Families and clans and entire tribes, following the acacia groves east toward the Nile, south toward remaining water sources, north toward the Mediterranean coast, and walking away from homes that had sustained them for 10,000 years, carrying everything they owned, burying children and elders along the way. Talia moved among them, invisible when she chose to be, present when needed. A woman struggling with birth, Talia appeared as a healer, ensuring mother and child survived. A child sick with fever, Talia administered medicine that wouldn't be discovered for 4,000 years, watching the fever break, vanishing before questions could be asked. An old man dying beside the trail, Talia sat with him, holding his hand as he breathed his last, ensuring he didn't die alone. She couldn't save everyone. Hundreds died daily from disease, exposure, exhaustion, and predation. The migration was a meat grinder, consuming the weak and unlucky, testing humanity in ways that made her chest ache. But the strong survived. The adaptable. The ones who could abandon old certainties and embrace new possibilities. Natural selection, accelerated by immortal intervention, creates populations pre-adapted to river valley life. Population management through environmental pressure. She hated it. She couldn't stop it. So she did what she could, healing where possible, comforting the dying, ensuring that those who survived arrived with enough strength to build new lives. You look exhausted. Nyx appeared beside her, materialized from evening shadows. They stood on a ridge overlooking the migration trail, a river of humanity flowing east, campfires dotting the landscape like fallen stars. I am exhausted, Talia admitted. 7 months of this. 7 months of watching them suffer because we decided their home should become a desert. Not decided. Accelerated. The desertification was inevitable. Everything is inevitable if you wait long enough. That doesn't make it right to rush. Nyx was quiet for a moment, her expression calculating. I've been running numbers. 8 million people lived in the Sahara at the start of history. Based on current migration patterns and mortality rates, approximately 5.2 million will reach the river valleys. The rest will die en route or remain in marginal zones that can't support them. 2.8 million people. That's the cost of our convenience. That's lower than the natural mortality rate if desertification had proceeded naturally. If we'd waited 2,000 years, climate chaos would have killed millions more. Our acceleration actually saved lives. You don't know that. I calculated it. 87% confidence interval. Nyx met her eyes. I understand you're angry. I understand this feels wrong. But the mathematics support our decision. Cruel calculus is still calculus. Talia wanted to argue, but Nyx's certainty was absolute. She'd run the numbers, analyzed the scenarios, and determined that immortal intervention, even cruel intervention, produced better outcomes than non-intervention. The logic was sound. It still felt like murder. The way stations are working well, Nyx continued. Hidden water caches, marked trails, game preserved in migration corridors. We're losing fewer people than initial projections suggested. Another 3 years, and most of the viable population will have relocated. Viable population. Listen to yourself. They're people, Nyx. Not data points. They're both. And if we want to save the people, we have to understand the data. Nyx's voice held an edge of frustration. You want me to pretend emotions matter more than mathematics? They don't. Emotions tell us what we want to be true. Mathematics tells us what is true. I prefer truth. Even when truth is cruel? Especially then. Comforting lies don't save lives. Below them, a woman sang as she walked, a haunting melody in a language Talia had been studying for 5,000 years but still didn't fully understand. Other voices joined, creating harmony that carried across the darkening plain. A funeral song, maybe, or a traveling song, or perhaps just something to keep feet moving when exhaustion demanded rest. They're singing, Talia said quietly. They often sing. Rhythmic vocalization reduces perceived exertion by approximately 12%. They're singing, Nyx, and not optimizing. Not calculating. Just being human. Talia turned to face her. That's what you miss with all your mathematics. The parts that don't quantify. The resilience that doesn't show in data. The spirit that survives even when the numbers say it shouldn't. Nyx listened to the singing, her expression unreadable. Maybe. Or maybe spirit is just another variable I haven't properly quantified yet. She vanished, leaving Talia alone with the singing and the dying grass and the river of refugees flowing toward futures they hadn't chosen. The faces of 2.83 million. Death 1,847,293, the mother. Talia found her 3 days into the migration, sitting beside a dried stream bed that should have held water but didn't. The woman was perhaps 35, though exposure and exhaustion made her look 60. 2 children lay beside her, both dead, their small bodies already stiff in the heat. They kept asking for water, the woman said in a voice like sand. I told them we'd find some. I told them the next valley. The next ridge. I kept telling them. She looked at Talia with eyes that had moved beyond grief into some territory that had no name. They believed me. They died believing I'd find water. Talia knelt beside her, medical sensors automatically cataloging the woman's condition: severe dehydration, organ systems beginning to fail, maybe 18 hours before death. She could save her. A single intervention, a medicine that wouldn't be discovered for 4,000 years, violated every protocol, but was technically possible. "Can you help them?" the woman asked, looking at her children. "No. I'm sorry. They're gone." "Then I don't want help either." The woman laid down beside her children, one arm around each small body. "We'll stay together. That's all I have left to give them." Talia stayed until the woman's breathing stopped, her medical consciousness noting the exact moment of death while her emotional awareness fractured under the weight of preventable tragedy. She added 3 names to her casualty database: Amara, mother; Kito, son, age 7; Zara, daughter, age 5. 3 more faces for the 2.83 million. Death 892,441, the elder. He'd been a storyteller in his village, keeper of oral histories spanning generations. Now he sat alone beside the migration trail, too weak to continue, abandoned by his clan because they couldn't carry him, and survival demanded hard choices. "I know what you are," he said when Sophia appeared. His eyes held remarkable clarity despite his dying body. "The dream teacher. You taught my grandfather. You've been among us for longer than our stories remember." "Yes," Sophia said simply. Lies felt obscene, facing someone hours from death. "Did you make the water fail? Did you kill the grass?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because we believed consolidation would save more lives than it cost. Our model showed an 87% probability of success. Because we thought we understood climate systems well enough to manage them." Sophia sat beside him. "Because we were arrogant." The old man nodded slowly. "I'm dying because you were arrogant. My grandchildren are walking toward the Nile because you decided they should. Our entire people are being herded like animals because you wanted us concentrated." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "And you admit it. What's the point of lying to a dying man? There isn't one. That's why it matters that you're honest now." He closed his eyes. "Will my grandchildren survive? Will consolidation work? I don't know. The models say probably. But models aren't certain. Then I'll die not knowing if my suffering served any purpose." He breathed slowly, each inhalation labored. "That's the worst part. Not the dying, I'm old, death was always close. But dying without knowing if it meant anything." Sophia stayed with him until the end, holding his hand as breath stopped and another name joined the casualty list. Kato, storyteller, age 71. Died questioning whether his death had a purpose. She couldn't answer his question. Wouldn't know for generations whether the 87% confidence held or collapsed into catastrophe. Death 2,104,856, the young hunter. Talia found him on the trail's edge, 19 years old, enhanced bloodline evident in his bone structure and muscle definition. He'd been attacked by something, a large predator maybe, his abdomen torn open in ways that her medical consciousness recognized as fatal even with intervention. "Sky teacher," he whispered when she knelt beside him. "My grandmother told stories. You helped her once. During the old drought. I remember her. Kea. She was brave. She died 3 years ago. Before we had to leave." He tried to sit up, failed, his enhanced strength meaningless against catastrophic injury. "Will my family make it? My younger siblings are only 10 and 12. Will they reach the river?" Talia accessed the migration database and found his family's position in the network. "They're strong. Healthy. Good leadership. Probability of survival is 73%. Not certainty. Nothing is certain. But better odds than many. Tell them." He coughed, blood bubbling. "Tell them I died bravely. Not like this, crying, afraid, begging not to be alone. Tell them I died protecting them from something. I'll tell them you died asking about them. Thinking of them. Wanting them to survive. Talia held his hand as enhanced biology fought uselessly against wounds too severe for even modified genetics to repair. That's braver than any fictional heroism. That's real love. He died 18 minutes later. Another enhanced human, with superior genetics, is meaningless against the chaos of forced migration through hostile territory. Another name in the database. Another face Talia would remember across millennia, another fraction of 2.83 million. She'd witnessed thousands of deaths like these. Would witness thousands more before the migration ended. Each one with a name, a face, a story. Each one is prevented by simply not accelerating the desertification. Each one was justified by models showing 87% probability that more would die without consolidation. The mathematics held. The deaths accumulated. Both things were true. The Nile Valley, Sophia's preparation. The river valley was chaos. Sophia stood on the eastern bank of the Nile, watching the first significant wave of refugees arrive. Thousands of them, emerging from the desert, seeing green for the first time in months of walking. Some collapsed and wept. Others rushed to the water, drinking until they were sick. Children splashed and played, laughing with the relief of survival. And behind them, more came. Endless waves of humanity, all needing food, shelter, medical care, and integration into established populations that weren't prepared for a massive influx. "We need more granaries," a local elder said beside her. He was Egyptian, part of the Nile populations that had been here for millennia, now facing demographic transformation. "We can't feed this many. Our stores won't last the season." "You'll have more," Sophia spoke with quiet certainty. "The flood this year will be generous. Plant extra grain. Build more storage. The surplus will come." "How do you know?" Kronos is managing Nile flooding patterns to ensure adequate food production for refugee populations. "Because we've calculated exactly how much grain you'll need in engineered conditions to provide it. Because nothing about this migration is natural, including the resources to sustain it, it faces significant challenges." "Faith," Sophia said instead. "Trust that provision will come." The elder looked skeptical but nodded. He'd seen Sophia before, the dream teacher who appeared in sleep, who taught new techniques and technologies, who always knew what was coming. If she said food would be available, he'd prepare for abundance. More manipulation. More lies disguised as inspiration. But what choice did they have? Let the refugees starve? Watch populations clash over scarce resources? Allow chaos when careful planning could prevent it? "I need to visit the others," Sophia said. "The camps downstream. They'll need teaching, too. The camps are dangerous. Disease. Violence. Desperate people do desperate things. I know. That's why I need to go." She walked south along the river, passing through scenes of suffering and adaptation, families building shelters from papyrus reeds. Fishermen teaching desert refugees to cast nets. Children playing together, mixing languages and customs, creating something new from the collision of cultures. In one camp, she found Kehinde and Amara. The older woman was sitting outside a crude shelter, grinding grain on a stone. Her hands moved mechanically, automatically, but her eyes were distant, focused on something internal, something lost. "May I help?" Sophia asked. Kehinde looked up and studied her face. "You're not from here." "No. I'm a traveler. A teacher. We had a teacher. The sky teacher, we called her. She taught my grandmother to read the stars." Kehinde's voice held something complex, gratitude mixed with anger, appreciation mixed with accusation. "She told us to follow the acacias when the water failed. She knew it was coming." Talia. Of course. She'd been in the Sahara for decades, teaching, guiding, preparing populations for displacement she knew was inevitable. "Did she help you?" Sophia asked carefully. "She saved my daughter's life during the journey. Appeared exactly when we needed her, healed a wound that should have killed." Kehinde's hand stilled on the grinding stone. "But she didn't save the others. My mother. My youngest daughter. 3 grandchildren. They died on the trail, and the sky teacher never came. I'm sorry. Are you?" Kehinde's eyes were sharp despite her grief. "Or are you another one like her?" Another teacher who appears and disappears, who knows things she shouldn't know, who helps sometimes but not always, following rules we're not allowed to understand. Sophia felt the words land like blows. This woman, grieving, exhausted, displaced, had seen through the veil more clearly than most and had recognized the pattern of selective intervention, the evidence of coordination, the impossibility of their claimed coincidences. If I were, Sophia said slowly, what would you want to know? Why? Kehinde resumed grinding, the stone scraping rhythmically. Why teach us and then abandon us? Why save some and not others? Why guide us here and then vanish? What do you want from us? What do we want? The question that kept Sophia awake through immortal nights. What did they want from humanity? To guide them? Control them? Save them? Create them in an immortal image? Atone for the guilt of having too much power? I think, Sophia said carefully, that teachers want their students to surpass them. To take what they're given and create something better. To become independent, capable, strong enough that they don't need teachers anymore. That's a nice story. I don't believe it. Why not? Because if you wanted us independent, you'd teach us everything and then leave. But you don't. You teach us pieces. You appear when it serves your purposes. You guide us toward goals we didn't choose. Kehinde looked up, meeting Sophia's eyes. You're not teachers. You're herders. And we're the flock. The truth, spoken plainly by a woman with nothing left to lose. Yes, Sophia admitted. Sometimes we are. And I'm sorry for that. Kehinde stared at her, shocked by the honesty. You admit it? What's the point of lying? You've already figured it out. Then tell me why. Why hurt us here? Why kill our home and force us to the rivers? What do you gain? Control. Consolidation. The ability to guide millions instead of managing scattered thousands is significant. Concentrated populations are easier to protect, educate, and advance. Sophia sat on the ground beside her. And yes, it serves our purposes. But it also serves yours. River valleys can support larger populations, more complex societies, and greater achievements than scattered nomadism ever could. We're cruel, but we're not wrong. You're playing God. No. Gods wouldn't agonize over their choices. Gods wouldn't sit in refugee camps questioning their decisions. Gods wouldn't look at women like you and wonder if the suffering we caused was worth the civilization we're trying to build. Sophia's voice cracked. We're just beings with power. Trying to use it responsibly. Failing constantly. Kehinde was silent for a long moment, her hands still on the grinding stone. Around them, the camp hummed with life, thousands of displaced people building new lives from the ashes of old ones, adapting because they had no choice, surviving because the alternative was death. My daughter is pregnant, Kehinde said finally. She'll give birth here, by this river, in a land our ancestors never knew. Her child will grow up Egyptian, not Saharan. Our language will fade. Our traditions will change. Everything we were is dying with the grass. Not everything. You carry your culture inside you. In your songs, your stories, your understanding of the world. That doesn't die unless you let it. It transforms. Becomes something else. Something that serves your purposes more than ours. Maybe. But it also becomes something stronger. Blending with Egyptian culture to create something new. Your grandchild will inherit two worlds, not one. That's not loss, it's expansion. That's what you tell yourself to sleep at night? I don't sleep. None of us do, really? We just wait. And worry. And wonder if the good we're doing outweighs the harm. Kehinde resumed grinding grain, the rhythmic scraping filling the silence. The sky teacher saved Amara. I should hate her for not saving the others, but I can't. Because Amara lives, and I'll meet my grandchild, and maybe that's enough. It has to be enough. It's all any of us have. Sophia stayed until the grain was ground, then helped Kehinde bake bread over a small fire. They didn't speak much, but the silence felt less hostile. More like understanding, not forgiveness, but acceptance of complexity. Recognition that good and harm could coexist, that beings with power could wound and heal simultaneously, that suffering could create opportunity even as it destroyed homes. When Sophia finally left, walking back toward the northern camps, she felt the weight of Kehinde's words pressing on her chest. You're playing God. They were. And the terrible thing was, they were barely competent at it. The weather machines, hidden in the Tibetan mountains. Desertification proceeding on schedule, Kronos announced through the network connecting all 3,200 Immortals coordinating the transformation. His consciousness carried cold, calculated necessity. This was the most significant environmental manipulation since the climate masters had triggered the end of the Ice Age. His consciousness cold with calculated necessity. Atmospheric pressure differential established, he reported, watching holographic displays show the great rivers of air that had once brought life to the Sahara now diverted north and south, leaving a widening strip of stagnant, dry atmosphere in between. Through the network linking 3,200 immortal minds across the globe, he felt the weight of collective responsibility. 17 atmospheric manipulation installations, coordinated by beings who'd sworn to help humanity, now conspiring to destroy an entire ecosystem in the name of population management. The machinery hummed beneath the mountain, invisible to human observation, buried under stone that would survive millennia, pressure modulators, atmospheric ionizers, climate control systems that made the installations that had ended the Ice Age look primitive by comparison. All of it focused on a single purpose, forcing the monsoon south, starving the Sahara of rain, transforming paradise into wasteland within 5 centuries instead of 2 millennia. Phase 2 parameters holding stable, Nix reported from her monitoring station in the Tibetan highlands. Rainfall reduction maintained at 73% below the historical average. Lake Chad water levels are declining at projected rates. Migration patterns following model predictions. Casualties? Talia's voice cut through the network, sharp with accusation. Within acceptable parameters, Kronos replied. Current mortality rate is 35% of refugees, lower than initial projections of 40 to 45%. The way stations are working. Acceptable. You quantify human death as acceptable. I quantify all death, Talia, human, animal, plant. The Sahara ecosystem is dying, that's unavoidable, whether we accelerate it or not. The question is whether we manage the human transition or let it happen chaotically. His consciousness touched hers through the network. Your medical stations are saving lives. Don't pretend this is simple slaughter when we're actively working to minimize casualties. Minimizing casualties we're causing. Minimizing casualties that would happen regardless. We're changing the timeline, not creating the crisis. The argument was old, familiar, and unresolvable. Kronos let it fade, returning his attention to the atmospheric data streaming through the network. The machinery was working perfectly. The climate was responding as modeled. Humanity was migrating exactly as predicted. Everything according to plan. Everything horrible. He wondered sometimes if other species had faced similar choices. If every advanced civilization eventually reached the point where it had to choose between managing lesser beings and letting nature take its course, it would significantly impact their societal structures. If godhood was always this exhausting, this morally ambiguous, this impossible to navigate with a clean conscience. But the machinery hummed beneath the mountain regardless of his doubts. The monsoons failed regardless of his guilt. The Sahara expanded regardless of whether he felt he was making the right choice. Power demanded use. Use the demanded consequence. Consequently, he was required to live with the weight of 2.8 million deaths purchased for the goal of population consolidation. He would carry that weight. Had carried similar weights for 5,000 years. It would carry worse weights in the millennia to come. That was the price of immortality, the burden of intervention. The cost of playing God when gods didn't exist and someone had to make the terrible choices anyway. The evidence problem, Erebus's discovery. Erebus stood in what had once been Kahinde's village, now abandoned for 3 years. The structures had collapsed, the fire pits filled with sand, the familiar signs of habitation erased by desert winds. In another century, nothing would remain. The Sahara would consume all evidence of the 10,000-year human presence here. Which was precisely what Kronos had intended. Convenient, Erebus murmured, examining the sand-covered remains. We force humans to migrate, and the desert buries the evidence of our intervention. The way stations Nix built? Buried. The marked trails? Erased. The managed game corridors? Returned to the wilderness. In a few centuries, no one will be able to prove we guided this migration. He knelt, brushing sand away from what had been a central fire pit. Underneath, he found what he was looking for, a carved stone, deliberately buried, marked with symbols he recognized. The sky teacher was here. She knew the waters would fail. She told us to follow the east wind. We record this for those who come after, so they know we did not abandon our home without reason. A message. A record. Human documentation of immortal intervention. You found one. Kronos appeared behind him, unsurprised. There are dozens scattered across the Sahara. Maybe hundreds. Humans have figured out that we don't leave records, so they're leaving them for us. This is a problem. This is inevitable. We can't control human documentation. We can only ensure it's buried under enough sand that it won't be found for millennia. Erebus stood, holding the carved stone. You're not concerned that in 4,000 years, someone might dig this up? Might find dozens of similar records? Might piece together that a coordinated group of immortal beings forced massive human migration? By then, we'll either be revealed or humanity will be advanced enough to handle the truth. Kronos shrugged. The desertification achieves its purpose, population consolidation. The evidence burial is a bonus, not a requirement. You're gambling with exposure. We're already exposed. Humans like Kahinde have figured out the pattern. They're documenting it. Burying records in places they think will be preserved. We can't stop that short of killing them, which I assume you'd oppose. Obviously. Then we accept the risk. Desert expansion buries most of the evidence. What remains becomes mythology. And by the time archaeology advances enough to find these records, humanity will have better things to worry about than ancient intervention. Kronos gestured at the dying landscape. This is the cost of large-scale intervention, Erebus. We can be invisible to individuals, but we can't hide from populations. Not anymore. Too many of us, too much intervention, too many witnesses with too much memory. So we're committed. No going back. No going back. We chose to intervene 5,000 years ago. Everything since has been cascade management. Kronos took the carved stone from Erebus's hands, examining the symbols. Kahinde's work, probably. She's one of the sharp ones. Figured out more than she should have. Sophia spoke with her. Apparently, I admitted the truth. I know. I monitor Sophia's conversations. Kronos didn't sound bothered. Sometimes honesty is less dangerous than careful lies. Kahinde won't spread what she knows, she has no evidence others would believe, and she's trying to build a life in the Nile Valley. The truth dies with her. Unless it doesn't. Unless her grandchildren find the record she's burying. Unless. Enough. Kronos' voice hardened. You've opposed every major intervention for 5 millennia. You've been right to question, right to warn, right to document our mistakes. But you've also been wrong about the timing. You keep predicting imminent exposure, and it never comes. Humans are slower to connect patterns than you think. We have time. How much time? I don't know. But more than you fear and less than we'd like. Kronos looked across the dying grassland, where the last green was fading to brown. This desert buys us centuries of concealment. River Valley consolidation buys us thousands of years of controlled development. It's not perfect, but it's the best option we have. Erebus wanted to argue, but the logic held. They'd made their choices millennia ago. Now they were managing consequences, buying time, hoping humanity would advance enough to handle revelation before revelation forced itself upon them. He looked at the carved stone in Kronos' hands, human documentation of immortal intervention, destined to be buried under sand for 4,000 years. A message from the past to the future, when desert would give way to archaeology and truth would emerge from beneath the dunes. When they find this, Erebus said quietly, when they piece together what we did, the forced migration, the environmental manipulation, the population management, they'll hate us for it. Probably. Or they'll thank us for creating the conditions that allowed civilization to flourish. Depends on whether they value independence or achievement more. Kronos set the stone down, letting it be reclaimed by sand. Either way, it's their judgment to make, not ours. We do what we think is right, document our reasoning, and accept whatever verdict the future delivers. And if the verdict is condemnation, then we deserve it. But we'll still have made the choices we thought best with the information we had. That's all anyone can do, even beings who live forever and claim to know better than those they guide. Kronos vanished, leaving Erebus alone in the dying village with the buried stone and the weight of 5,000 years of intervention. The desert expanded. The grass died. Humanity flowed toward the rivers, following paths they thought they'd chosen, building civilizations on foundations immortals had laid. And underneath the sand, records accumulated, human documentation of the age of guidance, waiting for the age of revelation. Waiting for the future to judge the past. The moral reckoning, hidden city debate. 3 years after migration complete, 4997 BCE. In the Himalayan council chamber, 3,200 immortals faced the implications of their manufactured catastrophe. Not all present physically, but all connected through the quantum network, all complicit in the choice to accelerate what nature would have done slowly. Talia stood before the assembled consciousness, her medical reports displayed in holographic detail. Not just numbers, faces. Names. Stories pulled from 3 years of documenting death along the migration routes. Final casualty assessment, 2,837,000 human deaths directly attributable to accelerated desertification. She let the number settle before continuing. That's 35.4% of the original Saharan population. Not abstractions, individuals. Amara, age 35, died of dehydration beside her children after telling them she'd find water. Kato, age 71, died, questioning whether his suffering served any purpose. Ren, age 19, died begging me not to let him die alone. Her voice remained steady through perfect, immortal discipline, but her consciousness carried weight that pressed against every mind in the network. Children, elders, enhanced and baseline, sick and healthy. We killed them. We saved 5.17 million, Kronos countered, his voice carrying the cold certainty that had guided his climate work for 5 millennia. Who would have died anyway when natural desertification occurred over the next 2 millennia? Our models projected 4.8 million casualties from the unmanaged climate transition. We reduced total mortality by 2 million lives through coordinated migration support. You can't know that. I modeled it. 87% confidence across 15 different scenarios. Every projection showed higher long-term casualties from chaotic natural desertification than from our managed acceleration. He pulled up the comparative data, mathematical precision made visual. Natural timeline, 4.8 million deaths over 2,000 years. Intervention timeline, 2.83 million deaths over 500 years. Net mortality reduction, 1.97 million lives saved. Mathematical justification for mass killing. Mathematical demonstration that intervention, even cruel intervention, produces better outcomes than observation. Kronos didn't flinch from the accusation. I hate what we did. Every death is documented in my consciousness, just as yours. But pretending there was a kinder option that wouldn't have resulted in more deaths over longer timeframes is dishonest comfort. Through the network, Prometheus's consciousness carried defensive certainty. The model showed 87% success probability. We validated against historical climate data from previous interglacial transitions. We followed every protocol. Sometimes doing the right thing requires accepting terrible costs. Except the 87% confidence encountered reality's complexity, Nix said quietly, her analytical consciousness presenting findings with clinical precision that masked emotional devastation. The models were built on assumptions that proved incomplete. Migration proceeded faster than projected, concentrating populations beyond sustainable density in some regions. Disease transmission rates exceeded our calculations. Resource conflicts emerged in patterns we hadn't modeled adequately. She pulled up the probability analysis showing how 87% confidence had weathered actual implementation. Projected versus actual outcomes. Projected mortality, 2.1 to 2.4 million, within 87% confidence interval. Actual mortality, 2.837 million, exceeding upper projection by 18%. Primary variance source, migration cascade effects exceeded models. Secondary variance, disease transmission in concentrated populations. Tertiary variance, resource conflicts during transition periods. We weren't wrong about the basic mechanics. Desertification proceeded as modeled, river valleys absorbed populations successfully, and consolidation enabled better coordination. We were wrong about the complexity of human response to forced migration. The 87% confidence was accurate for climate modeling. it was inadequate for modeling human suffering during climate-driven displacement. Erebus's dark form seemed to hold the chamber's shadows. This is the pattern. We model physical systems with high confidence, 87%, 92%, 95%. Then we apply those models to human populations and discover that human responses introduce variables we didn't account for. The mathematics holds for climate. It fails for consequences. And we only learn this after the deaths accumulate. What would you have us do? Korth challenged. Watch 8 million humans remain scattered across unsustainable territories? Observe a gradual population collapse from the inability to coordinate protection? Let natural desertification kill 4.8 million slowly instead of accelerating the transition to kill 2.8 million quickly? I would have you acknowledge that we don't know, Erebus replied. That 87% confidence in climate modeling doesn't translate to 87% confidence in human outcomes. That every intervention carries costs we can't fully project. That humility matters more than mathematical certainty. Sophia pulled up the genetic records, 2,837,000 entries showing names were known, approximate age at death, cause of death, and final location. These aren't abstractions. I spoke with Cato before he died. He asked if his grandchildren would survive, if his suffering served a purpose. I couldn't answer. Still can't. The migration succeeded in consolidating populations. But did it justify his death? Did it justify Amara's? Did it justify the 2.8 million who died trusting that we knew what we were doing? We didn't know what we were doing, Kronos said, but his voice carried less certainty than before. We knew the climate mechanics. We knew the population dynamics. We knew consolidation would enable better coordination. What we didn't know was how to make that transition without breaking people. Then we should have said that, Talia replied. Should have voted acknowledging that we understood climate but not human resilience, that we could model desertification but not grief, that we were confident about physical systems but uncertain about moral justification. Would that have changed the vote? Nyx asked. Silence held the network. 3,000 immortal consciousnesses contemplating whether honesty about uncertainty would have prevented the decision, or simply made them complicit with clearer eyes. No, Kronos admitted finally. We still would have voted to accelerate because scattered populations meant inadequate coordination. Because consolidation served our operational needs. Because we believed the mathematics justified the cost. Honesty about uncertainty wouldn't have changed the outcome, just made us more aware of what we were choosing. That's why it matters, Erebus said. Not because it changes decisions, but because it changes how we make them. We chose 87% confidence over acknowledged complexity. Mathematics over humility. We gambled human lives on models we understood and variables we didn't. And 2.8 million people paid for our certainty. The chamber held the weight of 2,837,000 deaths for a long moment. Not erased by mathematical justification. Not absolved by successful consolidation and not forgiven by probability projections showing worse outcomes avoided. Just carried. The way they would carry every intervention's cost across the millennia of their existence is remarkable. The river valley consolidation is functional, Kronos said finally. Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Indus civilizations are emerging. Human advancement is accelerating. The infrastructure we wanted to build is being built. We achieved our objectives. At the cost of 2.8 million lives, Talia completed. Success is purchased through suffering, achievement built on corpses. Progress is measured in casualties. That's what we accomplished. Yes, Kronos agreed. That's exactly what we accomplished. And we'll face similar choices again. We'll have similar confidence levels. We'll produce similar casualties. Because intervention has costs, and sometimes paying those costs serves survival even when it violates conscience. As long as we remember what we paid, Sophia said. As long as every death is documented. As long as we never pretend that mathematics made it clean. Nyx spoke into the weighted silence. I'm maintaining the casualty database. Every name we know. Every death we can document. When revelation comes, if it comes, they'll have complete records. We're not hiding this. We're just not telling them yet, because they're not ready for the truth, and we don't know how to make them ready. Will they ever be ready? Ether asked, the chronicler's consciousness already preserving this moment for future judgment. Unknown, Nyx replied. But eventually they'll be advanced enough to discover it themselves. When that happens, they'll find our records. Complete documentation. We let them judge us with full information. The council dispersed slowly, each immortal carrying a fraction of 2,837,000 deaths, a weight that would never diminish across the millennia of their existence. Above them, unaware that gods had just been forced to face their fallibility, humans continued living, dying, struggling, thriving, creating meaning in the face of mortality, building civilizations on foundations they didn't know were shaped by fallible beings who'd claimed divine authority they didn't deserve and couldn't effectively wield. The age of 87% confidence had encountered the mathematics of complexity. The lesson cost 2.8 million lives. The Immortals would never forget. The humans would never know. And both species would continue forward, bound together by an intervention neither could undo. 1,000 years later, the River Valley child. Nyla stood on the banks of the Nile, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. She was 15, born to a family that had lived here for so many generations they'd forgotten they came from anywhere else. Her grandmother's grandmother might have walked from the desert, but that was ancient history. Mythology. Stories told to children about the time before time. Now there was only the river. Only the valley. Only the certainty of flooding and planting and harvest, the rhythm of Egyptian civilization, felt eternal. Nyla. Come help with the nets. Her brother's voice pulled her from contemplation. She turned from the river, walking toward the life she'd always known, in the land her ancestors had died to reach. Behind her, the Sahara stretched west, empty, hostile, hiding secrets under sand that would remain buried for 3,000 years more. The desert had done its work. The evidence was concealed. The migration had become myth, the sky teacher a legend, the careful orchestration of population movement lost to time. Immortal intervention had succeeded. Humanity was consolidated, controllable, and advancing toward civilization. And in the hidden places where immortals gathered, they asked themselves the same question Kehinde had asked. Why? Why guide? Why control? Why play God to beings who might be better served by independence? The answers varied. The guilt remained. But the desert expanded nonetheless, burying truth and lies together, buying time that would eventually run out. 1,000 years later, Nyla stands on the banks of the Nile, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. She's 15. Born to a family that's lived here for so many generations, they've forgotten they came from anywhere else. Her grandmother's grandmother might have walked from the desert, but that's ancient history now. Mythology. The Sahara stretches west, empty, hostile, hiding 2.837 million names under sand that won't be disturbed for 3,000 years. The desert has done its work. The evidence is buried. The migration has become a myth. The sky teacher is now a legend. And humanity is consolidated, controllable, advancing toward civilization exactly as planned. Success, measured in corpses. Achievement, built on graves. Progress, purchased with 2.8 million lives. But while the desert buries evidence of the catastrophe, immortals are building something else. Something that will leave evidence they can never hide. In Chapter 15, the monuments rise. Karnak. Malta. Stonehenge. Massive stone constructions appear simultaneously across impossible distances. Quantum communication networks embedded in megalithic architecture. They need better coordination to prevent future disasters. But every stone placed is proof of supernatural intervention. Every alignment is evidence that they can't erase. They're saving lives by guaranteeing discovery. The countdown to revelation begins with the first monument. That's Chapter 14 of the First Awakening. Heavy chapter. One of the hardest in the book. If you made it through, you understand the actual cost of immortal intervention now. Take a moment if you need it. The comments are open for processing what we just witnessed. How do you judge the Immortals for this choice? 87% confidence, was it enough? This is AI Narratives and Tales. The monuments rise in Chapter 15.